Good morning. We are out here in this beautiful walk/run this morning, looking out at the pond. And this week's theme is all about grace. Last week was grit. This week is grace. And this has just been like such the perfect timing as we've been going through this really hard stuff last week and this week with loss, and how to kind of cultivate grace and find grace in our day, and even defining like what the heck grace is in our lives sometimes. And here's what I've realized. I've kind of felt like grace has shown up in three different ways. One, I feel like it's that moment when we're going through the thick of it, when we take pause and it's like, it's hard. It's really, really, really hard. And I know a lot of you are going through that space right now. And that moment happens, that little wash, that little voice, that little thing that comes over you and lets you know that everything's going to be okay and everything's going to be all right. Even if it's just for a second and you feel that, or you hear that, or the universe tells you that, or God tells you that, whatever your belief is, that's that piece of grace. Good morning, Shani. Good morning, Jessica. Part two is that I felt grace in my life are those moments where we give ourselves like that little piece of forgiveness for maybe a mistake that we made in our lives, or kind of that negative self-talk that sometimes we have with ourselves. And we're the worst. We're the worst on ourselves. We're the meanest to ourselves. And that ability to forgive yourself for the things that either got you to that place where you're having the negative self-talk, and maybe it's an action, maybe it's years of actions that you've been through that now have you speaking that way. Just having that moment of grace and forgiveness and going, maybe those things were meant to teach me something. Maybe I'm supposed to learn from this and move forward from this. And then number three is gratitude. And I think grace and gratitude show up a lot of times together. And having this ability to take a moment and go, maybe this thing isn't happening to me. Maybe it's happening for me. And this happened to me the other morning too, of changing our expectations of something into appreciation. So for instance, I was, like, you guys will appreciate this, I was trying to log on to BOD, right, to get my workout in real early. It was kind of a stressful morning trying to get everything in. It wasn't working. It wasn't loading. And instead of getting, my initial reaction was to get a little bit frustrated and mad and like, I'm so frustrated. This doesn't work. Instead, I took pause and I said, how lucky am I that I can work out in my home right now in the middle of a pandemic with this amazing community of women, and arm's dying. And I have the access to workouts like these, to this streaming platform. Even if in that moment it was slow to load or whatever, that's my expectation. But I turned it into appreciation, and it just transformed that thought, which then transformed my next thought, which then transformed that hour, which then transformed that morning, which then transformed that day. So coming at this as gratitude for everything and appreciation for everything rather than expectations. And that's grace. And I also feel like grace is that moment, like when we want to be so reactionary in life. So whether you're in this just crazy, like heated argument, or, really passionate about something and you want to be so reactionary, or someone says something to you and you just want to like fire back, but you know that you can't take back anything you do or say. And so instead of being reactionary, you kind of take a pause. That's grace. So as I was learning like all about how grace has shown up in my life, I thought, what are ways that we can practice more grace? What are ways that we can bring more of it into our life and I've kind of figured out like these three things that we can practice maybe each day. And one of them is just taking that moment of pause when you're going through the thick of it, which from my dear friend who lost her dad this last week, that's the space she's in of loss and trauma and grief, and we're experiencing that with her and going through this walk with her and being by her side, and just coming out in moments like this and experiencing mornings like this and feeling that rush over you that goes, it's gonna be okay. Like, yes, it's horrible what happened, and it might never feel the same again. Like, maybe you'll never reach the kind of life you had before, or you won't get back to that, but you almost kind of have to find a new normal, and it's going to be okay. So one way of just kind of sitting with it, whatever hard thing you're going through right now. Number 2 is learn to be a little bit, rather than reactionary, almost find like a stillness and a pause in your life sometimes, when I think a lot of us can be fiery and zingers, right? Either to ourselves, like just the meanest to ourselves, or the meanest to somebody else when we're kind of in the heat of it and feeling something. What if we learned instead, like almost like a 3-second rule, before we respond or before we say something or do something that we might regret? What if we took that moment of grace and forgiveness with ourselves or somebody else, and we went 3, 2, 1, deep breath, now react. Or sometimes longer than 3 seconds if it's sometimes a significant other that pisses you off, or it's just a big situation in your life. Maybe you need to sleep on it. Maybe you need a week to just kind of digest it, so then you can show up as your highest self with it. Give yourself that time, that forgiveness, that grace, whatever that looks like for you. And I think that's one way we can practice it more, is allowing ourselves that pause. And then number 3 is gratitude. And we talk about this all the time. I feel like every podcast, every great speaker, every personal development, anything talks about gratitude. And you might go, yeah, I know, and just kind of turn it off and brush this part off and go about your day. And yeah, I get it. But do you really? Like, are you actually doing it? Did you wake up this morning and take 1.5 minutes, 90 seconds to think of 3 things that you're grateful for that are different than the 3 things you thought of yesterday? Because you can't keep going over the same things, right? What if every morning you thought of 3, can be tiny things or moments from that day or the day before that you're grateful for? Can change your whole life. They've done so many studies of how just those 3 things, writing them down every morning, little things, have changed like low-grade level pessimists into low-grade level optimists in 21 days. That is the power of gratitude. And they did it with 83-year-old men who have had 8 decades of pessimism in their life. They took like crabby old men, like the kind. And they did this practice with them, 21 days of the gratitude, and transformed their mindset. So they started looking at the world with a different lens, almost like they put on a different set of glasses, because they knew the next morning they'd have to think of 3 things. So it made them start looking throughout their day of the things that they were grateful for instead of the things that were wrong in the world. Life transforming. And I bet you those 83-year-old men wish they had done it back when they were 18, 19, 20, even younger. What if we could teach our kids that? Amazing. All right, ladies. Love ya. You are just everything. I am, speaking of grace and speaking of gratitude, I am so crazy grateful for all of you. And helping us get through this just hard season right now. So thank you for letting me lean on you so that my friend can lean on me, and helping me fill my cup so that I can be there for her. You guys are awesome.